If you were with us a week ago, you heard the Monk School's foreign affairs expert Janice Stein say the Middle East is currently the most dangerous and chaotic as she's seen in 50 years. And with the crises comes criticism that U.S. President Barack Obama's administration hasn't done enough to calm the tide in the region. Joining us now for more, another observer with half a century's experience watching this region. In New York, Leslie Gelb, President Emeritus at the Council on Foreign Relations. And Mr. Gelb, it's great to have you on TVO tonight. How are you?
Good to be here.
Excellent. I want to start by reading something David Rothkopf wrote in Foreign Policy, and then I'll get you to comment on that. He says, the situation in the region is unprecedented. For the first time since the World Wars, virtually every country from Libya to Afghanistan is involved in a military conflict. Oman seems to be the exception. The degree of chaos, uncertainty, and complexity among the twisted and often contradictory alliances and enmities is mind-boggling. Do you agree with his assessment?
Yeah, I think it is mind-boggling. It's confounding. It's horrible for the people who live there, and it's confounding for the foreign policy makers.
Let me ask you if you would share Janice Stein's observation, since you've been watching the region since the 1960s. Can you recall a time of equal instability across so many countries as right now?
No, I haven't, but it's not just between countries. That would be somewhat manageable. Most of these problems are within countries, and it's much more difficult to get at these, in effect, civil, racial, religious wars than it is wars between nations.
Is that because, you can always sit two different nations down at a negotiating table and ultimately hammer something out, but civil wars are more intractable?
Yeah, between nations, you have conventional forces, and the impact of a real military power like the United States is much greater in those circumstances. If they're in tanks or they're firing artillery and so forth, they're much more vulnerable to the kind of force we have. When it's internal, often you can't even see the enemy. In a lot of these places, the enemy inside houses, living with the civilian population.
If you go through a partial checklist of what's going on here, and admittedly this is only partial, one sees a power vacuum in Libya, military rule in Egypt, civil war in Syria, ISIS in Syria and Iraq, Sunni-Shia hostilities in Yemen, Iran, which looks much more emboldened these days, Pakistan, which is always dangerous and always teetering.
Right.
So of that partial list, which is the one that keeps you up at night the most?
Well, ISIS is the one that keeps me up most at night, but as you know, if you talk to different people, they'll give you very different answers to that. But I think ISIS is the single biggest threat to come out of that region ever, as far as I'm concerned, to the world. Maybe since Islam carried out the campaign to Muslimize the world at the time of Mohammed.
How come?
Because they're awfully effective at threatening nations from within. And it's not small scale like Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda would do terrible specific things. But here is a terrorist operation that is a state now within a state, sort of, and is threatening to take over other states. And their ability to spread their wings and their power and their influence is what makes them more threatening. And I think these are just outright crazy killers.
Do you think they're a threat to the American homeland?
I do. I think they're a threat to you guys up in Canada and to us. And frankly, I thank heaven every day that we don't get attacked because I expect it to happen.
And for those people who say they're just a bunch of crazy guys in pickup trucks with machine guns, what would you say to that?
I would say just look at what they've done already inside Syria and in Iraq, starting almost with nothing.
Okay, let's look at the United States and its relative power and its ability to project that power, let's say over the last half century. They clearly were the preeminent power, international power in the Middle East going back 50 years ago and since. Are they still?
Well, we still are more powerful than any other state within the nation or outside the region. But we're not powerful enough to really resolve these problems, and certainly not with military force, because as I said, military force is not as effective with these internal problems as in traditional wars between states. So we still count more than anyone else. And if there is going to be some coherent strategy, military and diplomatic, to deal with these issues you've run off naming, then it has to come from us. You know, people say, oh, isn't it terrific now? The Saudis and the Gulfies have finally gotten their act together, and they're sending fighter bombers to Yemen. Egypt's even sending force to Yemen. Well, I don't think they're going to be able to do very much. And before people keep on cheering about all this, they've got to start thinking about what if. They always start cheering step one, but they don't look at step two. What if Iran starts countering them? And what if Iran pushes them back? What's the implications for us at that point? So before we cheer, we have to think it through. And that's something we've almost forgotten how to do. And that's part of the problem too. You know, people start acting on their own because they aren't sure what the United States is going to do.
Well, if the United States can no longer control events in the Middle East, which seems pretty apparent, can it at least shape events in the Middle East still, in your view?
I think we can, but we need damn good strategies in order to do it. And it takes a lot of convincing to get that done. You know, for example, look at the negotiations with Iran. Now, on its face, what's preferable? A deal that would lengthen the time Iran could make a nuclear breakout, or economic sanctions that have never brought any of these nations down and to capitulation, or going to war with Iran. And if there is no deal, what do you think will happen with Iran's nuclear program? They'll go back and speed it up to the point where they can go nuclear tomorrow. Now, people never talk about the alternatives, or they talk about unrealistic alternatives. So the debate has reached a point where there's so little confidence in the White House here that they'd prefer a more dangerous situation to a deal negotiated by Mr. Obama. Now, that's craziness, but that's where we are there. Take Syria. Let me just give this other example. Take Syria. Now, President Assad of Syria is a bad guy, a very bad guy. But who's worse? Who is more of a threat to the United States and our friends and partners in the area? Is it Mr. Assad or is it ISIS? To me, the answer is quite clear. It's ISIS. And if that means working with Assad to defeat ISIS, we've got to do that. But you've got to formulate a strategy that shows people how to do it and how it's going to protect their interests.
Well, I infer from your comments that you don't think the United States has a strategy right now. And to that end, I'm going to read an excerpt from a piece you wrote a few months ago that really stood the foreign policy world on its head because it was so critical. Here's what you said. The Obama team lacks the basic instincts and judgment necessary to conduct U.S. national security policy in the next 2 years. It's simply too dangerous to let Mr. Obama continue as is with his current team and his way of making decisions. America, its allies, and friends could be heading into one of the most dangerous periods since the height of the Cold War. I don't read those remarks to remind you of how tough you were a few months ago, except to say you're not known as being a kind of a rash guy who writes a cheap hit to get a headline, but that was pretty tough stuff. How come you wrote that?
I hated to do it. I really did. It bothered me a lot to do it. But I felt he's got 2 more years to go. President Obama's got 2 more years to go. And the situations in various parts of the world really are scary. And with his present team, he's just not going to be able to get it done. There's too much loss of confidence around the world of our partners, and too little fear by our enemies. And with 2 years left to go, I wanted him to take a look at rejuggling his team, because he needs a more experienced crew to put together the kinds of strategies I'm talking about. That's where our leadership really has to come from.
Do the changes that you want require a new team or a new president?
There's not going to be a new president. He's a plenty smart guy. It's not a question of how smart he is. It's a question of his instincts for putting together a workable strategy. He never had much experience as an executive, either for internal affairs or external. And then he was thrown into a very difficult set of situations, and he didn't perform so great. His predecessor was even worse. So we've had a stretch of 2 presidents facing problems that are severe without the kinds of abilities and without the teams necessary to cope with those situations.
Well, let me go down the checklist again, and I'll get you to weigh in briefly on each situation, and you can tell me whether you think they did right or made a mistake. Did the administration pull troops out of Iraq too quickly?
Maybe a little too quickly. I think we should have kept some troops there. But look, this issue comes up all the time, and it's a very fair question. Look, we were there for almost 8 years. We spent billions and billions of dollars training and arming the Iraqi forces. Who trained and armed ISIS? Who trained and armed the jihadis? Did General Petraeus train them? Did the United States arm them? They started from scratch. And yet the guys we had for 8 years didn't do the job. As soon as they faced the battle in Mosul, they threw away their arms and they ran. Now, if we stayed there 10 more years, we're not going to be able to fix that problem. It's up to the Iraqis to decide whether or not they feel they've got something worth fighting for, and whether their leaders know how to lead them in battle.
All right,
it didn't happen. It didn't happen.
We'll move to another country then. How about Libya? The administration got involved. Gaddafi is dead. Was that all a mistake?
Absolutely. It was dumb, because anyone who thought that just getting rid of Gaddafi was going to bring about a more stable democratic situation in Libya knows nothing about life or about Libya. If you knew anything about Libya, you knew you cut off that head and you would have chaos. What did we do? We cut off Gaddafi's head. We had the military power to do that, and the place fell apart. And if you had any background there, you would have seen that. But we had this unusual combining of conservatives and humanitarian Democrats to want to bring democracy to Libya, and they didn't think it through. And the consequence is the chaos in Libya and the dangerous Libya you now see.
Was the administration's response to the Arab Spring appropriate in your view?
No, because it takes not a few years to change countries into democracies. It takes decades and decades. You have to change the underlying political culture. You got to change the laws. You've got to create civil society. You've got to create a basis for democracy. Because otherwise, if you just lop off the dictator and hold an election the next day, who wins? The best organized group wins. And who are the best organized groups in the Arab countries? It's the radicals. It's the Muslim Brotherhood. It's the crazies in Libya. So we saw that in Gaza Strip when Bush did it, and we saw it in Egypt. That's what happens if you go from dictatorship to elections. It takes time. We did it right in South Korea, in Taiwan, and Turkey, but it took decades to get that job done and to change from military dictatorships to more or less pretty good democracies.
Let me move you to Syria then. Once President Assad crossed the red line that President Obama laid down for him, in other words, don't use chemical weapons or else, and then he did, and then there was no or else, what then?
Well, then he needed a strategy, as I said. And in that situation, the beginning of strategy is to ask yourself the question, what's the most serious threat we face in this hellhole? The administration and others France in particular, or Britain. They were all fixated on that bad guy Assad because he was so bad, and their preoccupation with him alone meant that we didn't begin to realize how serious a threat ISIS would be. And all of a sudden, a year or so later, they became what we see today. And they refused to make hard and fast decisions about that threat. So we sort of helped the Sunni rebels inside Syria, but we didn't help them very much. We broke off relations with Assad, but yet we were sort of closing one eye to working with him in the fight against ISIS. We had our big ally, our NATO ally, Turkey, on the borders there, in effect helping ISIS. It was a total mess. So there never was a strategy. And one day we're working with Assad and with the Iranians against ISIS, and the next day we're condemning them and telling them to get out of the fight. Everyone is totally confused in an incredibly dangerous situation.
Well, you've been nothing if not clear that you think the administration lacks a coherent strategy to deal with this part of the world. And I appreciate that in a 23-minute television interview, it may be difficult to enunciate what that strategy ought to be. But can you give us some sense of what you think a coherent American/Western strategy towards that region ought to include?
Yeah, I would say there are three basic elements to it. One is it's important to try to restart sensible negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. That would do a good deal to cement a lot of the anti-American feelings in the area. Secondly, we want to conclude a good agreement with Iran and convince Congress that an agreement with whatever flaws it may have is better than war or simply letting Iran proceed on its own toward a nuclear weapon. Get that agreement, and it opens up possibilities for future settlements with Iran. I don't know whether we'd get them, because the Iranian, the guys who really run Iran, the mullahs, are bad guys too. But at least we have that possibility. Third is we've got to find some way of working with the Iranians and with Assad's Syria against ISIS in a way that does not critically damage the Sunni rebels and others we're hoping to help in the long run.
Well, let me just go down that list. There's a graveyard filled with American presidents who've tried to do right by the Israeli-Palestinian situation, and all have come away shaking their heads saying it's hopeless. What makes you think that re-engaging on that is going to make any difference at all?
Because I think it's important to re-engage and not to throw our hands up and say it's impossible. And I think we have to shift our focus as well in how we use our power in these negotiations. And we do have power here. The parties are more dependent on us than in other parts of the Middle East. Now, what do? We've been concentrating for years and years on what a settlement should be. But the point of the matter is, we all know that if you can get a settlement, what it should look like. It's a two-state solution. And we almost had it twice at the end of the George H.W. Bush administration, at George W. Bush administration, and at the end of the Clinton administrations. They were 97% toward a deal. But the issue is not what the final deal should look like. It's how to make it possible for the Palestinian leadership and the Israeli leadership to say yes to this inevitable kind of compromise. So we've got to focus more on the politics of the situation than the substance of a settlement.
Let me ask you about the third part of that strategy that you outlined a moment ago, namely working with Iran and Syria against ISIS. I want to ask you about American public opinion. I mean, after a decade of war in Afghanistan and Iraq, do you think the American people still have the stomach for what it will take to crush ISIS?
If it involves sending in U.S. ground troops, I don't think so. But as you probably know, the polls of the Republicans show 70–80% of Republicans in favor of putting U.S. boots in on the ground in Iraq and Syria again, and almost the majority of Democrats. So we forget all too soon what we can and can't do and what force can and cannot accomplish. So it's not politically impossible for us to be stupid again. We just need our leaders stepping up and asking the questions, what if we do that? What happens? And what if it doesn't work? Are we prepared to put in 10,000, 50,000 more troops to do the job? Is it really our job? Isn't it true that when you have ISIS, of maybe all ISIS supporters and their troops, 100,000 people, when we have millions supposedly against them, why can't they do the fighting? Why can't we tell them that unless you do it, and we'll help you, it's not going to get done? In these situations, time and again, they always wait for us to come in and solve the problems for them. Then they start criticizing us. Then it doesn't work. Then we send in more troops. We know the pattern, and we've got to cut it off at the pass and tell them in advance, ultimately, this is your war.
In our last 20 seconds, let me ask you whether or not you've suffered any personal repercussions to the article that you wrote excoriating the Obama administration's lack of a strategy.
Well, two things. First of all, I got no congratulatory calls from the White House. And secondly, I got an enormous number of emails and calls from people within the administration saying I was too soft on the White House.
Too soft?
I swear.
Interesting. Okay. Well, Les Gelb, we've wanted you on this program for an awfully long time, and we're disappointed it hasn't happened until now, but we're glad it finally has happened. So good to have you on TVO tonight. Thanks so much for your time.
Enjoyed.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.